Motorcycle suspension is one of my favourite subjects, and it never ceases to amaze me the people I meet and people I go riding with who have got fully adjustable suspension or partially adjustable suspension, and they've never touched it their entire lives. It's a resource there on your bike and you're paid for it, but they're too scared to touch it or don't know what to do with it. Suspension, a lot of people say, oh, it's a black art and all that sort of stuff. It isn't, but it can appear overly complex. But there's one manufacturer out there that takes the guesswork out of the suspension setup. It's Harley-Davidson. I took out their Pan America 1250 ST, the road-going version of the existing Pan America, and got the user manual before I went out, looked up what the recommendations were for the suspension setting on the preload and damping side, and they lay it out exactly for you. There's zero mystery about setting up the suspension on this bike. It's absolutely brilliant. Just a little note before I start, in some geographies they have the automatic ride height and automatic rear preload on this bike. But for the European models at least, everything's manual. All the suspension is manual for this bike. So there's no automatic ride height, there's no electronic preload suspension adjustment or anything on this. Everything's manual. Right, just wanted to get that out of the way. Okay, here we go. We've got preload on our rear shock, and they give you a table and saying, what is the rider's weight? Starting off, anything under 68 kilos, minimum rear preload on the bike. Fine, easy to understand. Now, you just pick off your weight, and that's your riding weight in all your clobber, all your gear, helmet, boots, everything like that. So you say, okay, my weight is 103 kilos, let's say. So we go along the table, that's 21 clicks on the rear preload. That is your rear preload sorted. That's it. No messing, no guessing, 21 clicks. It's because the designers of that bike know the geometry of that bike and what effect weight has. They've taken the time to do this, to find out what effect the weight of that person, the rider on that bike, has on the handling of that bike. And they're giving you great advice saying, we want you to add this much rear preload to make sure that shock is in a reasonable part of its stroke. But also, that's maintaining the posture of the bike. Now you think, oh, that's bloody great. Yeah, but they go one stage further. I've never seen another manufacturer do this. Look at this. Now they say, oh, have you got a passenger? Right, if you've got a passenger and they're 57 kilos, let's say, I want you to add another 34 clicks of rear preload. Now, in this instance, on this bike, 34 clicks is the maximum preload. So if you were a rider weighing 67 kilos, you'd be at zero preload. Just go maximum rear preload. Okay, let's say you're a 88 kilo rider. You want to go 15 clicks on the rear preload, and you've got 11 kilos of luggage. Add another 12 clicks of rear preload. It's so easy. If you add the panniers, well, weigh your sports panniers, you'll only have to do it once. I bet they're somewhere between 5 and 10 kilos each. They look more like 10 kilos each. So just adding the sport panniers on that Pan America, that's probably another 20 kilos, but measure them with some baggage weigh scales or something like that. I know my Vario panniers on my GS are 10 kilos each. Bit bloody heavy, I will say. So all of the guesswork is taken out of that for you. Harley is saying, if you're going to put this much weight on the bike, on the front and the rear seat, this is what we want you to do with the rear preload. Oh, but it doesn't stop there. And of course, all this extra weight on a bike affects the front forks as well. So they're giving you settings to add front preload as well, to bring those forks back into a reasonable part of its stroke. Now, not every manufacturer does the same things with every fork for every reason. So that, for instance, the Aprilia Touareg 660 I had, if you added a passenger and the likes, it would overwhelm the rear end a bit and chopper the bike out a bit. And they actually wanted you to take off front preload to get the geometry of the bike back round a bit. Harley have done their homework in this instance and said, no, in this instance, we want you to add front preload to that bike to get the geometry right when you're adding this weight. The passenger stuff as well. If you're adding passengers, we want you to do an extra few additional turns. It's unbelievable. Now, forget about the damping on a bike for a moment. That is all about getting the forks and the rear shock in a reasonable part of its stroke, at the higher end of its stroke, so you've got lots of compression travel left for the bike. But it is also getting the geometry of the bike back to where the manufacturer thinks that bike behaves best, steers best, handles best. So when I booked that ST out for a test drive, the first thing I did is got the user manual on the site, found out what I needed. In fact, I only needed that and that, and took them with me on the test drive. Out the test drive, I fully wound off, or well, let me go back a bit. Out the test drive, first off, I set the front preload and the rear preload to what Harley recommend in their table. And then I set the damping an absolute minimum, front and rear. So that's both compression and rebound on the front and the separate compression and rebound on the back as well on this. And then I also set it to maximum as well to see what the range of damping was on that bike. But once I had that preload set, I can just leave that. I can leave that for the next 5 years if I wanted to, unless I took a pillion or added luggage or anything like that. But because they're so prescriptive, it's so easy to add or remove a couple of clicks of preload or anything like that to get the ideal handling if you're going out on tour, if you're going out on 2-up or anything like that. So let's see what Harley recommend on the damping now. Okay, so they've got compression and rebound damping on that rear shock, and they're giving you 3 targets to go for. Standard, comfort or sport. They're just making it simple. And they're saying, right, if you want the damping set up in a bit of a firm setting, bit sporty, wind the damping screws in to half a turn open. So you wind it fully in all the way. Don't be brutal with it, do it gently. You don't want to ruin those adjusters. And just back it off half a turn each. That's the rear shock done. Easy peasy. Or if we want a more comfortable ride, we can wind that damping, both sections, compression and rebound, to 3 turns out anti-clockwise, and the bike gets a much softer damping, much more compliant. And this is what I did out the test drive. So here we're doing this on the front end as well. In this case, the dampening adjuster is inside the preload adjuster, which is the orange bit there. But so the little damping adjuster is the little screw in there, rebound on the left, compression on the right in the instance of this bike. And they're giving you settings for standard, comfort and sport again, and you match the settings that you wanted at the rear end to the front end. So compression and rebound, 1 turn, 3 turns or 2 turns. It couldn't be simpler. And of course, you can go halfway. You could go standard and say, well, I want it a bit sportier, but I don't want to go full sport. You could go halfway and go 1.5 turns or something like that. So if I'm going across the Wicklow Mountains and scooting across those roads and stuff like that, the roads are quite uneven and stuff like that. I probably want a bit more suspension travel, so I'll back off that compression and rebound front and rear to make it a bit more on the comfort side. But if I'm on good roads and the likes of that, I might whack it all the way up to sport. Again, both of these adjustments take 60 seconds front and rear, and they're there to be made. I have to really applaud Harley for saying, let's take all the mystery out of suspension and say, here you are, weigh yourself. Now you might have a bit of problem weighing the missus. So just I don't know, put a bag of rocks on her back or something like that, because she'll lie about her weight, and just weigh the bag of rocks or something like that. What? You cheat. I'm on maximum preload without my partner. You fucking cheeky flipping. Yeah, well, it's true actually. So look at that. Look, otherwise, oh God. So on that test drive, now I had that bike for the day, but look, I was probably out riding on it for half a day, 4 hours I think it was. It was so easy for me, knowing I was going to test ride that bike, to find that user manual, find that information. So easy. It took me 20 minutes. I'm not a motor journalist. I'm not a professional vlogger. I work full time. I do this for a bit of a lark. But if I can find that detail, and I can adjust the suspension on that bike while I'm riding it, like just pull into a bloody lay-by and change it. It's not hard. I have not come across a single bike where it's been hard to make an adjustment. Well, there's only one actually. A lot of those bikes where they have a couple of collars and they're going up and down the bloody screw thread, they can be a bit nadgery. They can. Sometimes you have to take off a bit of plastics and stuff like that. Now, of course, I've got to give a bit of leeway to bike journalists who are a standard weight. Because look, all these bike manufacturers manufacture their bike with a kind of an average kind of weight guy in mind. And Harley, for instance, they post a value on their site of I think it's about 78 kilos. I'll put up on the screen. So if you're an average weight guy or girl and you're test riding the bike, there's a good chance you don't need to do anything with the preload at all. You're going out in these press launches and the likes of that, and it's not like you're taking pillions or loads of luggage and stuff like that. So there is a good chance you don't need to adjust the preload. But where bikes have adjustable damping, whether it be electronic or manual, they really should put these bikes from one end of the scale to the other to give you the character of the bike. Like the character of that Harley, it's amazing. You go sport mode, which has a lot of engine braking, and you put the suspension damping to sport, get the preload in the right setting for your weight. This thing is sharp as nails, Fantastic feeling to it. And not too much fork dive, because the engine's doing a lot of braking for you rather than you pulling on that front brake. Fantastic. I really wish a lot more journalists would play with the damping on bikes. It's so simple. So anyway, going back, I loved that Pan America ST. Absolutely loved it. And although it was manually adjusted suspension, I felt I had much better control of how I wanted that suspension to run over my 2023 GS, which I have dynamic and road as my two suspension biases. But you have no other input into that. And I felt I got a better ride out of that than I get out of my GS. Now that's over those roads, the Wicklow Mountains, they're a bit rough in places, so they challenge the bike, they do. But I don't find my low chassis GS to be great at high speed damping. But look, that's that bike, that's all there is to it. Whereas I found the forks, the big 47mm forks on the front of that Pan America, fantastic. Now, there's only one thing I'll add to what Harley is saying in their manual. On that damping setup, I would err towards the sport side if you're going to go two up the load of luggage. You just want to control that bike. And if you're at the softer side when you're fully loaded, you might find the movement of the bike too much and it actually might be uncomfortable for your pillion. So don't be afraid to go right over to the sport side if your bike is loaded to the gunnels and you've got a pillion on the back. You might find it's a much better ride for them. Even in sport mode on this bike, it's quite a comfortable ride. So I think you probably will get a better ride with the pillion when you're in sport settings on the damping. This video was purely about suspension because it's a bit pet subject of mine. I quite like it. But anyway, what? Bloodshot. Hey. No, it's nothing to do with 2 bottles of Merlot I had last night. Nothing. Yeah, this video was purely about suspension. I'll release another one, maybe in about a week's time, something like that, just on what I thought of the actual bike to ride and the general fit and finish and all that sort of stuff. Look out for that one. Cheers. It's a very playful bike. Bags and bags of character.